Welcome to GRE Snacks, snackable episodes about the GRE exam and graduate school admissions. I'm Tyler, founder of Achievable, and we have an affordable GRE course that includes everything you need to ace your GRE. A full textbook, videos on key topics, tons of GRE questions that are backed by our memory-enhancing algorithm, a built-in study planner and essay grader, and full-length practice exams. You can try it out for free by going to achievable.me. And if you like it, it's just $199, and the code podcast will get you 10% off. Now, let's get started. Today, we have Karthik from MBALink, mymbalink.com. Karthik, I'd love if you could just introduce yourself and your company.
Thank you for having me, Tyler. My name is Karthik from MBALink. We're based in Singapore, but work with clients from all around the world. I myself did an MBA a few years ago at a school called INSEAD. Grew up all across Africa, have fortunately traveled around the world and had a wide range of professional experiences. And so here to talk a little bit about what students can look forward to post-MBA and some of the things they should keep in mind.
Yeah, exactly. And what I found interesting about this topic when we were sort of doing our prep was that the post-MBA career options for international graduates, differs dramatically from what you'd say is like a typical person, right? So what is the primary,
Yes.
what are the main differences and why?
Wow. There are, I guess, quite a few. So I think one, of course, a big driver and motivation for many international candidates is that they want to significantly increase their income levels, right? They are, in many cases, coming from parts of the world where they're, again, local GDP and local purchasing power is quite low. What they may have been earning was good for where they live, but not good on a global scale or level, right? So they're looking to go to a top school, get a top job, and earn a lot more money in hopefully sort of hard currency, as they call it, US dollars, euros, pounds, something like that. So then you're looking at what are the companies that are going to hire me, pay me such a salary, what are the jobs that are out there. And some of the traditional industries over the last 10 to 15 years have been management consulting, some banking, yes, but also a lot now in tech. And that's really what a lot of international candidates are looking for. Of course, people also want to relocate or change their geography. They want to live in one of the hot cities of the world, maybe New York, London, LA, San Francisco. Dubai now has become incredibly popular. Singapore, of course, is popular. Hong Kong, etc. So these are always key considerations too. And another one that comes with relocation is the opportunity to get a visa sponsored and to move to another part of the world, and maybe potentially in the long term as well look to settle down somewhere else. Interestingly, though, more recently, I think more and more people have been moving back to their home countries or home regions, a little bit of which we can touch on afterwards.
Yeah, and so I guess then why does that change what opportunities you're either that are either available to you or that you'll likely pursue, right? Because my assumption, and you could correct me on this, was that kind of everyone who went to business school to an extent was trying to get hired by Google, Apple, Facebook, or McKinsey afterwards, right? And then that's kind of their way to get into both like those ecosystems, but then also potentially you said a San Francisco or a London or a New York or something like that. And is that just like a sort of a very general stereotype that I'm overusing here? And sort of how should I be thinking about this?
So I'll just say this: stereotypes exist for a reason. So you're not incorrect. There are very many people in every MBA class who fit that exact profile. You're, as you say, applying to the FANG companies of tech, or now I think they're being changed to the Magnificent Seven of tech. And then, of course, the MBB,
Magnificent Seven.
Yeah. Or the MBB, right? McKinsey, Bain, BCG, or the other top consulting firms, and again, some of the other top financial service providers as well. So I'd say in every class, 50 to 60% of people are very seriously gunning for those kinds of companies and jobs. And of those 50-60%, maybe 70 to 80% of that 50-60% will actually land one of those roles, right? But then you have another segment, maybe 30 to 40% of every class, who are either not that interested in those companies, or maybe just don't have a good chance with those companies, and they have to consider alternate opportunities, whether that's at a startup, or whether that's starting your own business, or whether that's doing something in the nonprofit sector. There are a wide range of such opportunities. But a key factor, unfortunately, that comes into all of this for international candidates is the visa sponsorship requirement. Now, different countries at different points in time have done things like, hey, you get a study visa, you automatically get to live and work here for X plus years. So it could be 1 year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years in sort of the longest cases. The US had something like that. Actually, I think it still may be active, but only for a subset of degrees or programs. The UK had something like this. Different countries have had that. But these laws and regulations are changing all the time. And I think it's become a lot more stricter in the last few years, with a lot of regime and policy changes around the world. So it's a much bigger hassle for a company to sponsor your work visa or work permit. There's the time involved, there's the cost involved, but there's also the uncertainty that, hey, we may have put an offer on the table, we've held a spot and role for you, and we've waited for the visa application to take 3 to 4 months, and oh wow, after all of this, it still gets rejected. Sometimes that happens. It's still a rare case, but that's a huge risk for a company to take. Whereas they could just hire a domestic or local applicant in whichever country it is. And even if they feel like, okay, maybe this candidate is not at the same level, but hey, if they can start working immediately and I don't have to worry about the visa and so on, they may choose to do that, right? So that's kind of what you're competing against, unfortunately. That being said, many of the very top companies don't compromise on quality, and they're more than happy to help you with the process. Unfortunately, because they've been doing this for very many years, they have a pretty smooth process, I'd say. They work with third-party providers as well. And they're like, hey, don't worry. That's why we come and recruit on campus like well in advance, right? So that your application is through, and by the time you graduate, everything is sorted and taken care of. So that's partly also why a lot of international candidates tend to go for the bigger and established names by default. And then if for any reason that doesn't work out, you have to start getting more creative, which is where it can get tricky. But I'd also say a lot of great opportunities exist.
Yeah, and I mean, as someone who runs a small startup, right, like just dealing with the visa process on our end would be something that we would need to figure out, and like we would need to learn about it, and then we'd have to go through it, and yeah, it's just like it makes a lot of sense that the well-established companies basically probably have a team of people dedicated to this at this point, right? Because they're doing it at such scale, so they're very, very good at it. And then also on the other side, the regulators are probably more likely to approve those people just because those companies have all their ducks in a row.
Exactly. That's spot on, right? I mean, so in Singapore, for example, every company is given a certain quota in terms of the number of, or let's say the ratio of a local versus international candidates they're allowed to have or can have. So now they give you more flexibility when you're a startup to say, hey, the barriers to entry are lower for you. You can have more international or foreign candidates in your, or employees, sorry, your company. And the barrier to entry is lower. Whereas for some of the bigger companies, they know, okay, cool, once you get an offer here, getting approved is almost guaranteed. But they also know that, hey, you're going to have so many people applying for these roles that we can't give out the offers and visas so easily. So it has a give and take, I think, all around it.
Yeah. Well, that all makes sense. So then let's talk about, what are the things that you see people, international students who graduate from MBA programs typically do?
Cool. It's honestly shifting all the time. So to our candidates or clients who are applying right now, so who are working with us at the moment and applying in the coming months to top programs, we're telling them upfront, do not assume or don't take it as a guarantee that you will find a job in the country that you're going to study in. In fact, in your applications and in your essays, you need to explain to the schools how you're aware that visas and finding jobs in other countries are difficult right now, and what are the other options you are open to, and what are you considering. So many top schools, and INSEAD sort of has this as part of their curriculum, so I'm speaking from experience here. They highlight three things. A lot of people who come and do an MBA are looking to change one, two, or all three of these three things. Number one is geography. Number two is industry. And number three is function. Now, it's almost impossible for someone to change all three at once. Meaning, you're
Mm.
going to a top MBA program, you want to work in a different country, and you want to change your industry, and you want to change your job function or level, right? What usually happens, they say, is post-MBA, you can almost certainly change one. You'll be really lucky if you can change two, almost impossible to change all three once. And the
Mm.
one that seems to be getting increasingly difficult to change is geography. So
Mm.
what we encourage students, and what a lot of top schools I think are encouraging students too, is you, even before you go to your program, but especially during your program, you should be connecting with companies and people in the countries where you have work authorization or you're willing to live. So meaning, probably your country of citizenship, I'm sure, will allow you to live and work there. But quite a few people also have either permanent residency or some kind of special visa for other countries. Um, if you're lucky enough that you sort of, through hereditary abilities or purposes, can get access to another passport or something like that, you should definitely look into those options too. But optimize for that, because then you can still change your industry and function a lot more easily, right? So in my case, for example, I hold an Indian passport by birth, but I have South African permanent residency. So post MBA, I joined a startup that had an office in South Africa, but sort of international company operating globally. But I was able to change my industry and my function to a lot much more senior level. But then I didn't have to worry about the work visa aspect of it. And that, I think, has actually significantly helped me accelerate my career and journey, because then when I did look to move internationally, I was moving at a much more senior level, and companies were willing to then sort of take a chance on you and go through the visa sponsorship process. Whereas
Right.
if you're doing that at a sort of entry to mid-level role, the company feels a lot less secure and or confident about taking a punt on you or going through the process. So that's a
Mhm.
key thing that we looked at.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Basically, I would say most of the people going into an MBA program are probably, mid-level,
Yeah.
right? Like how do you kind of, is the idea that, maybe you get into, you were say senior product marketing manager, and now you're senior product marketing manager in a new country,
Yeah.
or and you're just kind of happy with that, or should you be still looking for that post MBA bump in your
So
title and things?
yeah, great question. So that's where I think the trade-offs come into play. So if the number one priority for you is to change your geography, as you've just highlighted, right? Then you, I think, have to be open to a lateral career. So maybe different company, same industry, same function, just in a new country, right? If you believe that that's what you want for your life, like, hey, living in a different part of the world or city is the most important thing for me, and I want to build my future in this country, then a lateral move is easier for you to make. It's easier for the company as well, because the company knows, hey, you've been doing this. I know you're reliable. I don't have to pay you too much more. I don't have to take a risk. Okay, let's do this. So you're more likely to have an opportunity like that as well. And then, of course, you have to sort of back yourself to still then progress and grow, hopefully relatively quickly, right? And I think those are the trade-offs that for sure. And I mean, in every class and cohort, people do this all the time. Some people will optimize for geography. Some people will optimize for that pay bump and promotion post MBA. Especially, I think, in the world of finance and consulting, a lot of people are looking for the promotion, right? Almost nobody will be making a lateral move unless you're really focused on geography. Um, that's a great question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So then you also mentioned one of the things we talked about during our prep for this
Yeah.
was that, there's some particular considerations for people that are coming from like a family business background.
Yes.
Can you go into those a little bit more?
More than happy to. So was one of the most eye-opening aspects for me during the MBA, and I think tends to be the case for a lot of MBA sort of candidates and graduates as well. You'll probably find that at least 20% of the class, maybe if not more, are from family business backgrounds. A lot of the times they are doing the MBA because the family business is looking for a transition or to hand it over to the next generation. And they view the business school experience as almost like a polishing school for the candidate, for them to go and learn the ins and outs of doing business, hopefully develop some connections, build a reputation around the world. It's also for helping that candidate build a reputation in the eyes of the employees of the business, the shareholders of the business, and so on. Because if you're like, hey, I'm handing over this 40-year-old business to my 28-year-old son or daughter, if you were to just do that out of the blue, a lot of the top employees, investors, etc., would sort of scoff at this or be a bit skeptical. But if you can show that, hey, they've been to a top MBA program and I'm slowly going to ease them into this, it's something that then I think is a lot more palatable. So that's a key thing to keep in mind, because I honestly thought going into the MBA that everybody just does it to get a good job afterwards, and it's not something. So that's one aspect of it. But more importantly, the MBA itself is a key vehicle for a lot of family businesses to sort of grow and succeed. And I think for the candidates applying to a top MBA program who come from a family business background, they have to be very clear in terms of why they're doing the MBA and what they're going to go back to afterwards. So one of the things that MBA programs like is that, cool, if you're coming from a family business background and you're going to go back into the family business, they don't have to worry about whether you're going to get a job or not. They don't have to worry about whether you need a visa or this, and this. But they also want to know that you understand business. You're not just coming here to waste time for a year or two, because you know you have a guaranteed job waiting for you afterwards. It doesn't mean that you're just going to slack off. You still need to contribute to the class and hopefully build lifelong relationships for people you either work with or tap into. So the positioning of an MBA application for somebody coming from a family business background is usually quite different to your typical or average candidate. And we encourage them to really give a lot of thought into how they actually think they're going to impact the business once they come back from business or from an MBA program. Because a lot of the time they're just not aware of this. They've been kept at an arm's length from the business by the parents or the previous generation. And it's like, okay, cool, now, we want you to take over. But when I say kept at an arm's length, they may have just been doing very small roles or had limited visibility into how the entire business operates. And you need to be able to communicate, oh, I'm going to learn about operations, about HR, about marketing, etc., in the business, and be able to go back and apply this in our company. And it also becomes very specific to the nuances of the geography you live in, like regulatory issues, political issues. There are a lot of corruption. So if there is a lot of corruption, how are you going to operate? Are you going to play into the corruption, or are you somebody who wants to change and improve things? And then in terms of the industry itself, a lot of the time these tend to be, let's call it, non-sexy industries. So it could be manufacturing, logistics and shipping, or one of my classmates,
something like that.
Yeah, they're on a huge flour mill in Greece, right? And that's a really fascinating business to be operating as well. And so people be like, oh, if you're operating a business like that, why do you need an MBA? And people in general ask that question, but the schools themselves are also asking that question. So you'll really need to think about how you position it and explain the mid to long term journey for the company business. The family business.
Right. Well, and that's kind of, I mean, that's generally the idea anyway when you're going to an MBA program, is hopefully you learned something.
Yeah.
And hopefully you learned things that are going to help, like teach you about like sort of how quote unquote things should be done today.
Yeah.
Right. Which sometimes is not really applicable to what you're doing. But sometimes it is. And so that's kind of that's I think where you're going to, no matter what type of work you go into after your MBA, you're going to hopefully have gotten some valuable connections and valuable information from your MBA program that'll help you with your career afterwards. I am curious then, just kind of as we're going through this, other than what we've talked about, are there any other kind of postgraduate MBA, post MBA graduate opportunities that, do you think are worth highlighting here, or just that like anything that we didn't cover today that you want to make sure we cover?
Sure. I think the one sort of big one that is becoming increasingly popular is entrepreneurship. So, of course, the typical thing is, yeah, let me go get a job, play it safe, and that's fine. Or you're going into a family business. But going directly into entrepreneurship, starting a venture, starting a business is, of course, increasingly popular. A lot of people who go to MBA programs want to be entrepreneurs at some point in their journey. I think one of the things which I can highlight as an option that's become increasingly popular is entrepreneurship via acquisition. So that's when you acquire an existing business and then obviously operate and run it. But then there's, of course, starting something from scratch. And MBA programs are a great place to ideate, find co-founders, get access to capital, get access to experts who can provide you with inputs. But it's also not a magic wand that's automatically going to transform you into a great entrepreneur or business operator. I think anybody will tell you that the best way to learn is by doing, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship. And you have to really subside your ego, because just because you have an MBA doesn't mean you're going to succeed in business either. You have to be prepared to struggle, probably fail a few times, and then continue on the journey, right? So I think the biggest inhibitor to a lot of people post-MBA getting into entrepreneurship is the financial constraints. So they probably have some money to pay off, money to recoup as well from the investments that they've made. And so it's not a rush either. You don't have to do it straight after your MBA, but I think a lot of people who do start ventures during the program or immediately afterwards are also in a really good place. For maybe like highlighting a really famous example or set of examples, Grab and Gojek are the two biggest ride-hailing and sort of super app platforms in Southeast Asia, and they are both HBS graduates from the same year and came back to, well, first Malaysia and then Singapore and then Indonesia respectively, and launched this business. And they're probably like the most famous examples in Southeast Asia where we live of business school graduates who came back and went into entrepreneurship directly. And that's definitely a major one to just highlight, right? Because there are the safer paths, and then this is the riskier path, but it's not something that people should discount at all.
Yeah. And when you're applying to business schools, if you want to be an entrepreneur, do they like to see that? I mean, I would imagine they do to an extent, but...
So definitely, yes, they like to see that, but they also want to know that you don't just have pipe dreams, which I think is a key thing. So the idea specifically is I think maybe irrelevant. Of course, if you have a good idea, that's fine. But what's more important is your thought process. Do you understand the realities of doing business and building and running a company? And of course, if you're looking to learn a lot of those things, then you mentioned that, right? But schools definitely like people with entrepreneurial energy and desire, and just want to know that you are pragmatic about it, you're serious about it, you've thought through it, and you know how the MBA is going to help you on your journey. Not that, oh, hey, yeah, I woke up today, I have an idea, and that's why I want to do an MBA, and I'm hoping I'll get all the answers. That's not the case, right?
Right.
As long as you show your seriousness, I think that will.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This has been GRE Snacks, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Karthik from MBALink, and it's mymbalink.com.
Thanks.
Achievable has a great online GRE course that you can try for free at achievable.me and use the code podcast to get 10% off at checkout.